G'day, my name is David and I love my gardening. Just doing a quick run through of my vegetable patch, number 1, number 2. I just did the number 1. If you wanted to see that, you can click on the link for that. This is my vegetable patch number 2. When I originally moved in here, we built one bed and then we built a second bed. And this bed here has been extended. And this is my vegetable patch number 2. So we'll go through and do a quick tour of what I've done here this year. The year is December 2021 in Melbourne, Australia, summer. So what have I got going on? Here I have peas growing. So I've made of a makeshift trellis. I've got some snow peas and snap peas going gangbusters, and I've actually got through there some spinach on the other side, some forward hook spinach. This row here I've got jalapenos growing here, and for those with a keen eye you'll notice beans growing. I wanted to do an experiment this year. I build these trellises every year out of bamboo, and I then put cord which I tie to the bamboo and run down, tie to the tomato plants, and then wind the cord up around the tomatoes and train the tomatoes to climb the cord to support my tomatoes. And I figured I've got all of these bamboo posts here. I wondered if I could train my beans to grow up these posts, ready-made trellis, and pick my beans from these. So as I go around, first time I've ever done it, don't know whether it's going to work. I'd love to experiment, but we'll see that as we go along. So jalapenos going gangbusters. 2 weeks ago I went along and pinched the tops off of all of these, and now they've just gone, bazongas. It's a David word. They've gone crazy, gone gangbusters. So they've shot out from the sides and bushed out, which is what we want, and we'll get more heads with flowers on it to get more fruit. I've done it side by side, ones with and without, nipping the tops off. If you haven't done it, absolutely do it. Peas, as I mentioned, I'm having a bit of a problem, which I've not struck before, with these. You'll see this everywhere. It's bloody oxalis. If anyone has a remedy for this, please let me know. I would love to put in the comments below. It drives me nuts. I'm told that this stuff only grows in places where it's nitrogen poor, but I make my own compost. I put all sorts of amendments in it. Certainly not nitrogen poor. Some more forward hook spinach. And in the corner we have a massive rosemary plant that just does its thing each year. Tomatoes, as I mentioned in video number 1 of the garden bed number 1, I have over 140 tomatoes this year. It's my biggest crop of tomatoes. I just love growing tomatoes. It's just, I get a real buzz out of it. So go along and tickle my flowers. Hopefully everyone tickles their flowers. I don't know if you know, but tomato plants, every flower has a male and female part inside the plant. So inside the flower. So each flower can actually pollinate itself. So to pollinate a flower, to pollinate your tomatoes and increase your harvest, what you need to do is tickle your flowers. And the male pollen is up inside at the base of the flower. When you tickle it, the pollen falls down and the female part of the flower is at the front, and it pollinates it. So to improve your pollination of flowers, give your tomatoes a tickle. and it'll dramatically increase it. So yeah, you don't need bees or insects to go from plant to plant. It's all in the one flower. Certainly does help if you have insects doing it, but yeah, you increase your yield dramatically by doing it by hand. Continuing the tour, we have more jalapenos, more oxalis, buddy stuff, tomatoes, more tomatoes. Then we get into our corn. So we have 3 different varieties of corn that I've put in this year. And if I can find the tag, I'll tell you what they are. We have here a Kelvin Glory F1. I don't know what the F1 means, but if anyone does know, please let me know. Looks like the tag is missing from these guys, but they're starting to send up their male flowers, so it won't be long before we start seeing, you can see them starting to bulge up for the corn, so male flowers coming up, so it won't be long before we'll be producing corn. There's a second variety of corn on the end here, which is going a little bit slower than the one at the beginning, so it's always interesting to see. I love trying different varieties side by side and seeing what performs better than others. Where we are here, we have the sun rises over there to my right and goes over to the left, so it goes straight over the top of these. So these guys at the front will get more sun than the ones at the back, but because these have been slower, I think they're going to be disadvantaged. These guys have just grown much faster than those, so always interesting to see. You recognise these from my video number 1, more artichoke. These are more of the globe artichoke, so these guys are ready to be harvested, so we'll be harvesting some of those. More tomatoes. These are a cherry Roma. Give the flowers a tickle as they go past, improve the germination. We saw the beginning of that one before, which had the jalapenos in it. At the end here, we've got more beans, and I'll train these guys to climb up here, see what we get. More tomatoes, different varieties, lots of different varieties of tomatoes. I think this year we put in 12 different varieties of tomatoes. 11 different varieties, something like that. Some of which I don't know. I've got seeds mixed up from previous years, so I collect all my own seeds, and I germinate all my own seeds, and sometimes they get a little bit mixed up in the process of potting and repotting and then transplanting out. But these guys will be either grossless, they're not Romas, they're grossless, mortgage lifter. So we can actually come through here and see some of the tomatoes. Coming on. So very excited to have my babies coming along. Not sure if I'm going to have tomatoes for Christmas, I doubt it, but here's some more of the beans. So every one of these trellises I put beans on, so they are finding their way up these poles. A little bit awkwardly, but they are doing it. So rows and rows of tomatoes. For something different, here we have eggplant. So these are just a standard large size eggplant. These are Roma tomatoes. I've made the fatal mistake this year. I misidentified the tomatoes. Tomatoes fall into 2 different categories. You have what they call determinate, and then you have indeterminate. Indeterminate tomatoes means that They will keep on growing as long as you basically will let them grow. They'll keep on growing up and throwing out a main stem. They're indeterminate. They keep on going and going. And so all of these are indeterminate tomatoes, and they'll grow as high as this bamboo will allow me to. I didn't realise that these guys were Roma tomatoes. And Roma tomatoes are determinate tomatoes. They grow to a certain height and then they stop. They won't keep on growing all the way up to the top here. And when you're looking after tomatoes, when you're doing things to maximise your yield, there's two things. One thing you should be doing with an indeterminate that keeps on growing, you should be knocking the laterals off of those and encouraging the plant to grow up and put its energy into its fruit. Determinate tomatoes, the big thing you do is not take the laterals off. Your laterals are where all your fruit comes from. And because I didn't realise that these guys were my Romas, in my keenness I knocked all the laterals off. So potentially I'm going to reduce my yield of tomatoes by 75% maybe, I think. The places where all of the flowers and fruit should have been, I've taken off. So a big lesson on labelling and knowing which tomatoes are where when you put them out. Yeah, sorry guys, sorry babies, but yeah, these guys, you're indeterminate, they keep on growing. The recommendation and what I've always done is take the laterals off. The other day I had a mate over and he was asking me what is a lateral. Oh, here we go, I'll show you what a lateral is. So on a tomato plant you'll have a main stem, you'll have a leaf that will come out from that stem, and then at the junction where the leaf comes out you'll have a shoot come out. That's a lateral. So this one here has got a major lateral coming out. I've left this for a couple of weeks, I haven't picked up on this. If you go down the branch here you can see a small or minor lateral that's coming out, and the smaller ones are easy, you can just grab them and pinch them off. The bigger guys like that you have to be careful, because if you try and pinch that off you can actually cause damage to the plant and introduce disease. So the easiest way is just to nip that off with a pair of secateurs, and then that plant will continue to put its energy in. You'll have flowers coming out here as it comes up. So my general rule of thumb is I take all of the leaves off as it grows up until you take all the leaves up until the first lot of flowers. That way, you know, the energy is coming up and the plant goes into those bunch of flowers. You get good fruit set there, and then you know, tend to thin out leaves that aren't producing. You know, if you've got leaves in here that aren't, like this one here, it's not getting any light, it's not going to be contributing anything to the plant, so I'll lop that off. You know what? I kind of think a leaf is either contributing or it's taking away from the plant. These laterals, a big one like that, don't waste it. If you've got the space, you can actually dunk that in a beer bottle with water in it, just, you know, rinsed out bottle or glass, and stick that in water, and in a couple of weeks time all of these little hairs on here will send out roots to help encourage roots. You can actually just run your thumb down like I just did then, just in a couple of places, just a little bit of damage, and then dunk that in water, and that'll germinate a new plant. If it's not too hot, if you're in a place that's not too hot, you can actually just plunk that straight in the ground if you keep it moist. When you put that in water to try and germinate it to get more roots, I recommend taking just the tips of the plants off, tip of the leaves off like that, and that helps reduce evaporation and just a little bit less stress on the plant while it puts its efforts into producing some roots. So yeah, if you have a couple of plants from your local nursery, that's a good way to quickly get more plants. Moving on here, we've got watermelon. So it's the first time I've actually successfully got some watermelon action going on. We've got some pumpkins, a new variety of pumpkin. I can't remember what it was that I planted here as a seed. It's large, looks like a Jap pumpkin, but it's not a Jap. So I will be encouraging these guys are running this way, but I actually want them to go that way because I've got a big blank space of ground up here. So we've got a good lot of pumpkins going on in here. Ducking up into the top of the bed, we've got some more eggplant. So I mentioned before about laterals, taking the laterals off of tomatoes. I do exactly the same with my eggplants. So if we look in here, you've got a lateral coming out of the side of the plant. These are a lot easier. You can just grab that and knock that off. And what that does is it helps put the energy into making the plant grow up. I also believe it puts a little bit of a shock into the plant and encourages it to fruit rather than putting its energy into new growth. So those ones in there, I just knock those off. It helps clean up the plant as well, keeps air around it, reduces disease, and just end up with a lot healthier, nicer plant. These guys will grow quite large. Eventually I'll put a frame in here to support them, the same as my tomatoes. Got another trellis here. These guys are all Richmond Cucumbers. They're a Richmond round apple type cucumber. This is the first year growing these. Would you believe cucumbers are the same? You can actually, you're better to knock off the laterals on these guys as well, and it encourages the plant to grow up, throw out fruit. So that's where your flower and fruit are there. So be careful when you're looking at a cucumber. You've got two things at the junction. You've got one is a flower head and fruit, and you've also got a leaf or a lateral. So I'll come over here and see this one here. You can clearly see the leaf, but in here, right in there, if I can zoom in, you can see the flowers. So you don't want to knock those off. If you grab the leaf and carefully break that off, and what that will do is it will encourage the plant to put its energy into the fruit and flowering, as well as increasing the growth upwards. And the more upwards you get, and the more junctions you get, the more fruit. Every one of those junctions will get fruit. So you're trying to encourage the plant to grow up rather than throw out more laterals. So all of these guys can come off. And the other thing that this does is taking these laterals off. It opens up the plant. Cucumbers are very susceptible to powdery mildew. So you want to get air, light around this, as much space as you can, so that you don't get diseases. So knock off the laterals on your cucumbers carefully and you'll just get massive yields. So more eggplants and more tomatoes. Lots of different varieties of tomatoes, beans at the end of every trellis. So we'll see how that experiment goes. This, if you're wondering what it is an apricot tree. Grown massively, very quickly over the years. This is the first year that we've got a few flowers on it. It didn't go crazy with flowers. We've got a couple of fruit on it. I probably should take the fruit off, but I just can't do it. Just can't do it. Back up in this corner of this garden, we've got some, amongst the weeds, we've got some more watermelon doing their thing. So I'm not sure, I've never had much luck with watermelon. Oh, stray tomato. Not sure what variety that one's going to be. So that is a tour of my veggie patch number 2. Going to be lots of tomatoes this year, lots of sauces and salsas. If anyone's got any great recipes, please share them. If you have any questions about what I've done, how I've done it, how you can do it the way I've done it, you want to come and see how I've done it, just drop a note down below and I'll be happy to help out. Hope you enjoy.